Welcome, impactful parents. Today, we're going to talk about transgender children and all those needs that those kids might have. Now, I know that this is a pretty controversial subject, but let me tell you that if you're a parent and your child comes out as being transgender, there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do. So how do we help and support our children who are transgender? How do we support them in the best way we can? And today I have a very special guest speaker on. His name is Jack Ori. Jack Ori's mission has been to help the next generation of transgender kids have a much easier time than he did. Today, he is a parenting coach and helping families of transgender kids build authentic and supportive and relationships that can last a lifetime. So happy to have Jack on today. Got lots of great questions for you. Thanks for being here, Jack. Some people do not understand what transgender is. And so let's clarify what is that and how that fits into the LGBTQ community and how that's different than maybe, let's say, a more common, actually, I don't even know if it's more common, but more commonly known LGBTQ community like lesbian or gay. How is this different?
So the easiest way I describe transgender is that everyone has a gender identity, right? Like for most people, what's called cisgender is you were born with girl parts and you feel on the inside like a girl or woman, or the other way for men and boys. But for a transgender person like me, I was assigned female at birth, which means that I had girl parts, for lack of a better term, but I felt like a boy. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about transgender. It's just there's a mismatch between what you feel like on the inside and what your body is.
And just also to clarify to the audience, transgender does not necessarily mean or has any to do with sexuality as far as your preferences.
And it can get confusing for people sometimes because if you are transgender, like me as a transgender guy, before I transitioned, if I was female and had not transitioned yet, I was attracted to women, I'd be considered lesbian. But then if I'm transgender and I'm a transgender man and I'm attracted to women, I would be considered straight because of man-woman, even though I might not have male body parts. So, and I hope that didn't confuse anyone further.
Yeah. Well, there's just two different issues that I think that happen in the LGBTQ community that is not often clarified for people who are outside of that community. And one of them is the identification of your gender, whether you are a male, female, or neutral. And the other is their preference in who they want to have a sexual relationship with, or a romantic relationship for that matter also. And so what we're talking about is the physical body matching who they feel they are inside with gender only, not necessarily talking about relationship preferences.
Right, exactly. Because there's a difference between who you're attracted to romantically or sexually and who you feel you are gender-wise. So that's an important clarification.
I know that a lot of parents who hear this from their kids, their first reaction is going to be, what? Especially if they're coming from a religious background, which some religions do not, accept this type of outcome. Sometimes I feel like this could be just an uphill battle with this particular population, and especially for the parents who maybe don't want to accept the reality that their child is feeling this way. Do you see that a lot?
I see some of that. It depends on the parent. It's interesting that today I had asked on my Facebook group, what was your first reaction? And a lot of the parents said, I wasn't surprised, which was really cool to see.
That's great.
And so it does definitely depend on the parents. There are a lot of parents who are like, whatever my child is, they are, and are open to it. But there are also parents who will feel like, this has thrown me for a loop because this is not what I expected. I didn't really have any clue. And I think that's they both sets of parents have their own challenges. I think even if you sort of knew and you were accepting, it can be very difficult um to transition from an abstract I accept my kids however they are to the reality that this is your child that's talking to you. Or and if it's something you didn't know, then there's like the whole challenge of feeling like, how did I miss this, or what what's going on with this? Is my child sure? And that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Is my child sure? I feel like a lot of parents struggle with that. You know, is my child sure? Um, Personally, like some of the decisions that I made about who I am and who I was as an adolescent are not the same I would have done years from now today, right? So, and part of that is experience and growth and all those things. And so, but this is a really big decision, especially if they make that choice to transition, because there are some repercussions to that that are irreversible. So it's a scary thing for parents to hear this coming from their child, because you just want to make sure that they're sure, you know, type of thing. It's just, nobody talks about this subject. And I'm really glad that you're here, because I feel like on the parenting side, there's a lot of fear. A fear for, is my child making the right choice? Fear of, how am I going to react to this? Fear of, what are other people going to think? There's so many, the fear has so many layers. So with that, we're going to dive into this. And what are some of the most common challenges that parents have when when they come to you?
Right, definitely. And again, it depends on the parents, because there are two tracks. There are the parents who have already accepted this or expected it and want to know how to best support my child, and then there are parents who are still in that questioning phase. So I do want to speak to both tracks of that. As far as the parents who are still in the questioning phase, a lot of what helps is giving some information, because a lot of times people don't know that transition doesn't have to be medical. Like, some kids are not going to go that route. And also that kids under the age of 18 often take what's called puberty blockers, which are medications to stop puberty from starting, but those are reversible, so that if they stop taking it, puberty will begin. So sometimes that can be helpful for them to know. And then the challenges that I also see are, people are like, a lot of parents are, I completely accept my child. I want to support them. How do I do it? And definitely, how do I bring up concerns without making them feel like I don't accept them? So one of the things that I find I teach a lot, that's really helpful, is communication skills, right? Because in some ways this is different than other parenting challenges. In some ways it's not, because anytime there's a challenge, especially with a teenager, where you want to find that balance between being the supportive guiding parent and giving them that independence to make their own decisions. So that's always a challenge, right? No matter what the issue is. And so some of that stuff also really applies, like teaching active listening skills and how to phrase concerns in ways that don't impose your point of view on the child. Um, are the most important things that I teach, I think, because there's going to be concerns, there's going to be questions, and there's going to be also, is my child behaving in a way that I don't like because they're having mental distress over something to do with not being able to express their gender identity, or is this just like some other issue? And how do we deal with that, you know?
With the fears that parents are coming to you with, and they need help with the communication, with all the things, what fears would you say are the most common, and also maybe the most realistic?
A very common thing that I hear from the people who are still questioning, is, what if my child decides later that they're not transgender? What's going to happen then? And um, That's actually not a particularly realistic fear, even though it might sound like it, because something like less than 2% of transgender people change their mind afterward. I forget the exact statistic, but it's very small. But that's something a lot of parents worry about because they see it as this life changing decision. You know, they don't want their child to make a mistake. And the other fear a lot of parents have, which unfortunately is realistic and is more realistic depending on the area you live in, um, is what if there's discrimination? What if my child is bullied because they're transgender? What if the teachers are going to do something to them, or what if they get beat up, and all those kinds of things? And unfortunately, we do live in a world where there's prejudice and discrimination against people who are not the majority. And transgender people often are marginalized. And one of the things that we talk about is how to navigate that, how to help your child if there is something going on at school or in the workplace or wherever that shouldn't be happening. Because as the parent, one of the things that happens when you have a transgender child is becoming that child's advocate. Because sometimes the school doesn't want to call them by their chosen name or their chosen gender. Sometimes the school might not have gender neutral facilities for changing and have them be in gym class with girls or boys, that kind of thing. Or there are other things, or there might be bullying that the administration is looking the other way because their child is trans or something like that. So those are all things that parents need to be able to know. What do I do?
So they do. It's so much fear. You don't want your child to go through pain. You don't want your child to go through any suffering, and you definitely don't want your child bullied. But I know that this subject is so difficult for so many parents to hear, people to hear in general. I mean, even broadcasting this, I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with that. I'm even doing this right now, but I really feel like it's a not talked about subject that parents need help with, because it's not a parent's choice whether their child is transgender. And so, in a lot of ways, parents are feeling helpless and from the very beginning, because it wasn't they have no control. And so, right away, that loss of control that a parent has brings a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear. And some parents react to it, I would imagine, as with anything else that they lose power of. They either will try to be overly supportive, which is great, or they're going to take that denial, or even the stance of I'm going to no, like, nope, that's not it. Like, it's completely strong arming. I don't know how other to describe it. Strong arming the child to say that that's not going to happen, which is really unfortunate for the child who is going through so much already.
Right. And that becomes very difficult because unfortunately that can cause a lot of severe mental health issues for the child as well. And in the transgender community, something like 41% of transgender people attempt suicide before the age of 18.
Yes. Yes, it's the highest suicide rate of all populations is the transgender.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because of non-acceptance. And the good news is that studies show that just having just one supportive adult, especially a parent, really dramatically reduces the risk. So
That's great.
and yeah, and one of the things that I love when parents consult me, because the first thing I tell them is the fact that you are doing your best to accept your child for who they are is miles ahead of some parents, because there are parents, unfortunately, who will say, "Get out of my house." And there are transgender kids who are homeless, or who have no relationship with their family, or who have to be one way at home and another way at school. And that's a very difficult burden for a child to carry.
What do you think are the keys to creating a successful relationship with a transgender child?
That is a great question. And I want to say again, in some ways it's the same as with any other child, because with any child, the keys to a great relationship are having good communication, being accepting of the child's expression of themselves, and really, especially being able to listen, even if you don't understand fully what the child is going through, and and being able to guide them in a way that's still accepting. And I think all those things are super important for parents of transgender children, as well as parents of cisgender children. And the other thing that I think is helpful is to really be able to educate yourself or get some of that education on what it means for your child to be transgender, um, and to learn what some of those issues are. Comes with other challenges. Like, I've had parents ask me, how do I talk to my transgender child about puberty? Because that is something that might not match their gender identity, right? Like, if you have a non-binary, which is a child who doesn't identify as male or female, or you have a transgender child who identifies as the opposite gender, then talking to them about things like you're going to get a period could be triggering to them. So those are special challenges that parents need to think about if they have a child who's transgender. You kind of have to think about gender in a different way on top of all the skills that you use as a parent in your daily life.
So from my experience with my many years of working with children, the transgender children that I know, they have many, many triggers. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I feel like as a parent, it's really important to understand that your child might have these triggers and why, just make us aware so that we understand why your child might be irritable or whatever. Some of the ones that I know of, and please enhance on this list, is, obviously body, anything to do with your body, or, clothes fitting certain ways, people touching, even for hugs, very innocent, wanting to hug a transgender child when they walk into a room to greet them. They may not want their body touched. Things like that. What else would you say are some triggers that you know of?
Right. Yeah, definitely. The thing to keep in mind here is that we live in a very gendered society, and so that anything that makes you feel like you're not the gender you say you are can be triggering, like, especially sort of cultural things. When I lived in North Carolina when I first started transitioning, and North Carolina, like many southern states, everything is ma'am and sir. And
Yes.
so for me, one of the things that used to bother me a lot would be walking into a restaurant. Obviously, I didn't have the big beard then because it's before I transitioned medically, but I would be dressed in male clothing like I'm wearing now, and I had a short haircut, and I would walk into a restaurant and the server would say, "How you doing, ma'am?" And that would, like, really aggravate me because it would be like, can you not see that I'm not a woman, kind of thing. So things like that can be very triggering for some
Pronouns, then, I would imagine also.
yeah, pronouns, being called by gendered language, especially if it's the wrong gender. Things like a lot of times kids in school, especially, in school, like I mentioned, the gender neutral issue with locker rooms and bathrooms. If it's not, there have been cases that I'm sure you've seen in the news where a child is transgender and they identify as a girl and they're being told you have to use the boys' bathroom, or they identify as a boy and they have to use the girls' bathroom. That can create a real quandary because it's like, do I hold it in all day or do I go to the bathroom that doesn't match?
So that is a real problem in the school systems where I'm a teacher for 20 years and that's where I work. So, and I find that a lot. These kids, they don't know which bathroom to use, feeling that they know which one they want to use, but don't know how accepted they would be to use the other bathroom or not to use the one that they want. Are they going to get bullied when they go into the other bathroom? That's a big issue. And I do know several students who will hold it in all day long just to avoid that issue.
Yeah, that's a really exactly, that's exactly what happens. And especially, I think, with puberty, if your kid is in junior high, middle school, high school, and they're already starting to go through puberty, it can make it worse because, like, especially if you say you're a trans boy, you want to use the boys' bathroom, and you have your period right now.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
could be very awkward, to say the
Well,
least.
even having your period would be
Yeah,
very triggering.
right.
That's a monthly reminder that you
Right.
are biologically female and very difficult for a transgender boy to
Yeah,
accept.
exactly. So then there's that whole issue. There's whole issue with puberty, and then there's also the issues of, sometimes people are well intentioned, but they might forget your pronouns. Like a parent who's used to calling you by a female name or a male name, whatever the case may be, the name they gave you and the pronoun that they're used to for 15, 20 years, you know, it's not that easy for them to change because it just
Change.
happened by the time the child is a teenager. And so sometimes a parent might slip up and say the wrong pronoun, wrong name. That can be really triggering for the child because the child can be like, does my parent not accept me? Is that why they're doing that?
Yes.
You know,
It's so
and
good for parents to hear this. Not only the difficulties that they may not realize their child's going through, but that simple things like pronouns could really make a difference in how your child is feeling secure with you or not secure with you.
yeah, definitely. There was an article that came out recently where they did a survey. I think it was in the University of California, maybe. They did some study with transgender kids and their parents, and they asked the kids what makes you what do you need from your parents, basically, what makes you feel supported. And without exception, the top answer was my parent uses my name and pronouns that I've chosen. And the other thing that I thought was important about that study was it showed that the kids tend to rate the parents higher on support than the parents rated themselves. Like the parents will be like, I'm doing it terribly, I'm not being supportive enough. And the child will be like, my mom is super supportive. So I think that's something else to keep in mind, that don't beat yourself up, that even if you feel like you're messing up, your child will still feel that love and support.
Jack, there are so many parents out there who struggle with the acceptance of their child because their upbringing did not allow it. Their upbringing, whether it was religious or just the environment or culture that they grew up in, said, this isn't a thing. You can't change your gender. What would you say to those parents who struggle with that, who want to accept their child because they love them to death, but everything that they've been taught in the past says no?
Okay, I would encourage parents to look up LGBT friendly and accepting religious institutions, whatever your religious tradition is, whether it's a temple, church, mosque. There are some that are LGBTQ accepting. And sometimes you can even find those in community newsletters. Like when I was in North Carolina, I found a temple that was accepting because there was an LGBTQ newsletter that went out, and they had a list in the back of places you could look if you depending on what your religion was. And I found a Jewish temple that I'm still in touch with some of the people from, even though I live in New York now. So that can be helpful because that way there are other people who are going through this, who are part of your religious tradition, who aren't going to tell you throw out your religion, right? But instead are going to be like, here's how you can incorporate your religious beliefs while letting go of this belief. And you may sometimes have to set boundaries with your family members too, because if you have family members who are also part of that religion who do believe this is wrong, you don't want their voices in your head while you're going through this. So I think it's good to try to spend time around people who are accepting in that tradition as much as you can.
I feel like it is so important for parents to find their own support group for this. It's not an easy transition for your child, but it is also not an easy transition for you as a parent if you're listening to this. I want you to know that you're not alone as a parent if you're identifying and resonating with today's video or podcast, wherever you're consuming this content. And I feel like from what I know, there's a mourning period that comes with truly accepting your child for who they are and their transition that they want to make. And what I mean by that is the mourning period is like you have to let go of what you thought the future was going to be like. Because what happens as parents is when the minute you find out you're pregnant and you're going to have a baby, you have these visions of it's going to be like this. And you automatically, especially when you find out the gender of your child, whether it's a girl, you're thinking, oh, you could already imagine their wedding dress and the future babies and, and all these things. And if it's a male, like, those stereotypes. But as a parent, I don't think you can help yourself from envisioning these milestones and what they're going to be like and look forward to them. And now the game changes for you. And I think you have to, in order to really let go of the vision that you had before, you do go through a mourning process of letting that die in a way. I don't know how else to explain that.
Right. And that's something that's fairly common among parents, is that a lot of parents will feel like, I know I'm gaining a daughter, but I lost a son, or I know that I'm gaining a son, but I lost a daughter. And that's part of that adjustment that I call it the full family transition, because it's not just the child who transitions. Okay, because it's not a thing where it's like, okay, my child's a girl now, my child's a boy now, my child's non-binary now, let's go on with our lives. It's something that the whole family has to make adjustments to. And sometimes it can be difficult too, because one of the things I've heard from a lot of parents is, my child told me, but he's not ready for mom to know, or he's not ready for his little sister to know. And then you're living in the same house with people who don't know. And that can be stressful. So there's all those kinds of issues, and support is definitely important. And I do want to say I have a support group on Facebook for this exact purpose.
That's awesome. What's
yeah,
that link so I can put it out here on the video?
it is facebook.com group support network for parents of transgender kids. So yeah, and right now, I really encourage people, if it's something that you are looking for support with, to check out my group. I do a Facebook Live every Monday where I talk for a few minutes about a topic of interest to group members. Things like some of the things I've talked about here, like how do you talk to your kid about this issue? How do you talk to your kid about puberty? What do you do if you have family members that are not supportive? What do you do if you're not on the same page as your partner with this? Those kinds of things.
Those are very important topics. I wish we had time to dive into all of it right now, but we don't. But yes, those are the things that parents are dealing with, right? And they need to be addressed and supported.
I also do one-on-one coaching. If you need that deeper dive and you need that more personal, I don't want to say personal attention, because you get personal attention in the group as well, but if you need that more like intimate one-on-one guidance and support, that's something I do as well. So that's something that people can definitely contact me about if they need that.
Right. Then, and how would they do that?
There are a couple of different ways. Whatever your favorite social media platform is, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Coach Jack Ori. And you can also email me at jackaori.com.
And I hear that you also have a novel.
Yes, I do. I have written a novel. It's not actually trans specific, but that doesn't matter because it's about transformation. It's called Reinventing Hannah. I actually just got my proof copy yesterday with my new cover. And Reinventing Hannah is about a girl who unfortunately suffers a sexual assault at a party, and how she transforms after that. She goes throughout the process of the novel, she goes through a transformation process of going from being so quiet her friends call her mouse, to being somebody who stands up for herself and for other survivors. And along the way, she has to learn how to navigate her friends not always understanding or accepting who she is now, because they're used to the old her, and she has to learn how to talk with her parents and how to let them support her, because at the beginning she doesn't want them to know anything, and part of her transformation is discovering that they will be on her side. So I think it's something that parents of both cisgender and transgender kids can relate to. I also have a free guide if your child just recently came out as transgender. Go to my website, jackaori.com/ my child is transgender now what? And you can download this free infographic that gives you the first 6 steps you can take.
That sounds like an amazing resource. What message do you have for people who might be listening?
I just want to encourage everybody that one, you're not alone. That's always my core message for everybody is you're not alone. There are other people going through this. I can definitely relate to and help you through it. And the other thing is that to be patient with yourself. One of the things I see a lot with parents is they want it to be this thing where it's like they're the perfect parent. As soon as they hear that their child is transgender, they do everything right. And that's just not realistic. And it is a process. It does take time. And you can learn the skills to navigate this just like any other parenting issue that comes up.
Thank you so much for being on today, Jack. You have so much that you can offer our audience, and I really appreciate your candidness about talking about your own personal experiences and then being able to help others who really need it. So thank you for doing that. Until next time, parents, you got this. We're just here to help.